Hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. Irrelevant's Fantasy Football Show. I'm Grant.
And I'm Nick.
And today we're going to be going through our top 30 running backs for full point fantasy PPR. Okay, let's round out our top 5 running backs for week 9. And it'll start with number 1 overall, Dalvin Cook versus the Lions, James Conner at the Cowboys, Alvin Kamara at the Bucks, Chase Edmonds versus Miami, and Josh Jacobs versus the Packers. So what do you think of that top 5 so far, Nick?
So with Dalvin Cook, I mean, he's going to go against the 28th ranked defense against the run in the Lions. Dalvin Cook does have over 5 yards per carry, and he's got a touchdown, or he's averaging a touchdown per game. So I do like him at number 1 a lot. I like this list overall. I think you could potentially switch James Conner and Alvin Kamara 2 and 3. I just wonder what the game script is going to be for the Steelers against the Cowboys. I wonder if...
And that's like a situation where you could have potentially starters sitting out. Just because I don't think it's really going to be that close. Steelers are number 1 defense. Cowboys' offensive line's beat up. You have Andy Dalton or maybe a transcendent Ben DiNucci playing.
Possibly.
I don't know if I'd really want to. You aren't touching a quarterback on the Cowboys. I think it could be a blowout, personally. Even though it's in Dallas, I don't think that matters.
It's in Dallas, right? But again, I go back to the offensive weapons that the Steelers have through the air and whether or not they're going to lean on James Conner or whether or not Big Ben's just going to go through the air.
That's true.
But I think Alvin Kamara is better at 3 than 2 because the Bucs do have a good defense overall. I mean, they're number 8 and 10 respectively.
Yeah.
Versus the run
and this
versus
is
the pass.
This doesn't include Sunday's stats yet. These are slightly older stats, but we'll update on the breakdowns on these in the comments.
Yeah.
So Josh Jacobs and Chase Edmonds are 4 and 5. I like Chase Edmonds a lot. He really should be the starter for the Cardinals offense. You had Kenyon Drake, who wasn't really doing anything in the pass catching, and he hasn't been terrible. I mean, if you have him in fantasy, he's been terrible, but like overall in like the NFL, he's not been terrible. I think because when you look at Chase Edmonds, though, he's just been better. He's been averaging around 6 yards per carry, heavy pass targeting volume. He's really kind of the prototypical pass catching back you want to have for PPR. So he's got a good setup against Miami. The question is it going to be the Miami that just somehow causes an NFC West team to blow up again, or is it going to be just your typical Miami? I think Miami's a middle of the road kind of. They're currently, as of right now, number 25 against running backs. The Rams just played them. They were able to move it on the ground. It's just those horrible turnovers that really wrecked that. So if the Cardinals can play clean football, Chase Edmonds is going to be top tier this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do like his dual threat ability. So I think certainly top 5 is where he should be.
What do you think about Josh Jacobs and his 128 yards and 31 carries?
You know, Josh Jacobs is an interesting one because
he's playing at the Chargers.
He's playing at the Chargers, right? He is only averaging 3.4 yards per carry, so I just wonder what his workload's going to look like, and if he can get the requisite carries to make himself productive enough to earn that top 5 spot.
Yeah, if the Raiders are getting just destroyed, then that could be bad. Because he's not going to be like one of those guys right now. Right now, up in this season, he hasn't been one of those home run hitters yet. He's just been a volume guy. So if the game script is kind of, if it's just a back and forth, just pound the ball type thing, he's going to be in a great spot here. Chargers are mid-tier in running defense. But
yeah,
I think just sheer volume, if he gets anywhere near that 30 carries, which, he might not. He's probably going to be more around 20. he's still going to be a start, even with that kind of gross 3.4 yards per
3.4.
carry that he was averaging up until Sunday's game. I think, and he's also gonna be a threat in the red zone, so he has upside there as well. That's why
Right.
he's at number 5.
Right. He's a good red zone carry guy. Let me ask you a quick question about our number 6, James Robinson. When we were talking off air, I know you mentioned that you just wonder what the game plan is going to be because I do believe Mike Glennon is starting at quarterback.
Yeah, Gardner Minshew, fractured thumb, some ligament issues. Last I heard, that's a concern.
So I would think that because of that, they might run the ball more and just rely on James Robinson more to get his carries,
Yeah, to
early,
take pressure.
to take pressure off of Glennon. Excuse me.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about there is a kind of situation like the Jeff Fisher Rams situation with Todd Gurley, where you just see basically a defense lack any respect for any kind of passing game and just stack the box. I really don't think James Robinson is talented enough to overcome a stacked box. I mean, Todd Gurley wasn't. So you're going to have a situation where if they realize, like, hey, this is Mr. Glennon here, and just, like, pile everyone in, everyone on the Texans defense just decides to take up a timeshare about 5 yards out. You're not going to want to see the results of that. And you don't know if Glennon's going to be passing to him. I mean, there's a lot of questions when you have a quarterback change.
So you just think they're going to try to make Mike Glennon beat them? That's what it comes down to.
I would if I was the Texans. But then again, the Texans usually beat themselves. So that's really a question. And their defense is bad. It's currently the bottom tier in terms of the run defense. So against running backs, they're awful. So that's why Robinson isn't lower. I mean, he has a very good, juicy matchup. It's just Glennon's kind of dragging him down to the underworld right now.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So then at number 7, we have Derrick Henry versus the Bears, Christian McCaffrey at the Chiefs, Aaron Jones at the Niners, and then whoever the Niners are starting at running back versus the Packers. And that's our top 10.
Okay. So I think Derrick Henry, tough matchup, but, you really can't afford to sit this guy. That's why he's in the top 10. He's averaging right now 4.69 yards per carry, number 3 overall PPR running back. He had, up until Sunday, 7 touchdowns. So this guy's a beast. I think he can overcome essentially one of the top 15, top 14 run defenses in the NFL in the Bears. And this is going to be a Titans team, I think, that's going to be trying to work their way back from getting smacked down by the Bungles.
Yeah, that was a tough loss today.
You never want to see it.
Right. No, but I think you're right. I think they're going to I think that Derrick Henry is kind of the focal point of that offense, and so I think they'll try to get him going early and wear down that front 7. But they are a very good front 7. I mean, you've got Khalil Mack, just to name one of them. So I think it might be tough, but the more he gets going early on, the more that opens up for Tannehill, which again will open it back up for Derrick Henry. So I agree with you. I think he's got to be he's talented enough that he's pretty much a top 10 guy no matter who he faces.
Yeah, he can overcome the matchup. And
Yeah.
then we have Christian McCaffrey. Now, this one's dicey. I mean, there is an incredible amount of talent in Christian McCaffrey, but the problem I have with it, and the reason why he's not like top 5 with that matchup or something like that, is what is the share going to be? What's the workload going to look like? Because he's just coming back from an injury. Are they going to want to rush Christian McCaffrey in? I mean, he just had an ankle injury. He's coming back from it. Mike Davis has been playing well, and they said it's going to be around a 30-70 split between these two, which, I mean, they can potentially both produce in this, but it's going to be at the expense of Christian McCaffrey. It's not going to be a situation like he's not going to be taking away from Mike Davis. It's going to be Mike Davis taking away from Christian McCaffrey in this situation.
Yeah, I definitely think they'll try to ease him back in. But he has the talent. He has that raw talent that, again, he's a top 10 guy. I wouldn't quite say maybe no matter who he's against, but when you've got a guy that talented going against a mid-level run defense, then yeah, I'd say he has to be top 10 guy.
Yeah. So he's overcoming the injury and the Mike Davis.
Right.
Mike Davis has looked good.
Mike Davis has been a very pleasant surprise for Carolina.
And he might as well be the spokesperson for not paying running backs, honestly. He's not doing himself favors in the long run by doing that.
Right.
He's just proving, you just find a dude and just kind of go to an extent, which is, that's pretty rough. But, congrats to him for doing well. And he's looked very McCaffrey-esque.
Yeah, and I mean,
at a fraction of the cost.
And the Niners have done some of that too. I mean, they've got a large stable of running backs that they've had to parade through because of injury, and the way their scheme is, it just works.
Yeah,
so that's why, jumping ahead a little bit, we have the Niners in our top 10, even though we don't know yet to this point who they're going to start against the Packers.
Yeah, I think personally the Niners' run offense is going to be better than the Packers. The Niners are a top 5 run defense. They do a great job stopping the run. I think you're going to have a situation, though, where the Packers, sure, they're one of the worst in the NFL in run defense. I think currently before Sunday, well, actually probably especially after Sunday. Because Dalvin Cook just kind of had his way with them on national television.
Yeah, I mean, over 130 yards on the ground.
32.
No, I'm sorry, over 160 yards on the ground.
Yeah, he decided enough was enough. He was sick and tired of it. Pretty painful to watch, but congratulations to him. I think he just basically exposed the Packers' weakness. That's been their weakness the last couple of years, is run defense.
We've known that.
So
just go back to the championship game.
The real question with the 49ers starting running back is who the heck is it?
Right.
Everyone's gone. I mean, you might have JaMychal Hasty, but right now he's playing the Seahawks and looks pretty bad. And there's a situation where it could be anyone. So it's a game of, if you're a gambling person, you're starting whoever, just a random person on the 49ers running back room. So that's it's a tough pill to swallow. Aaron Jones, he's going to get those passes.
Assuming that the Packers line can hold up long enough, he's going to get his fair share of dump-off passes and hopefully even some deep passes. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I think Jonesy is very good dual threat. And so, whether or not you put Jones at number 9 and the Niners at 10 or vice versa, personally, I would say it's a coin flip, but that's how we have it. We have Jonesy at 9 and whoever the Niners start at running back at number 10.
Yeah, there's risk with both. And you could just have a putrid Packers run offense against one of the top-tier run defenses in the league, or you could have a really weird split that'll surprise you on the 49ers. So that's something to be aware of. What are you getting, There's a chance you could look really, really smart by starting some random dude on the 49ers, so you can get some smug points there, really upset everyone in your fantasy league. Just start some random guy and have him get 30 points. But there's also a chance it could be 3 different guys with 60 yards.
Yeah.
So that's the issue I have there. That's why they're in the bottom of the top 10. There's an opportunity, but there's also risks associated. It's not a slam dunk layup type situation with the Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Chase Edmonds, or Josh Jacobs. It's not one of those. But it still has to be acknowledged. There's potential there.
There's a large amount, yeah.
Okay, for running backs 11 through 20, I'm going to start with Myles Gaskin at Arizona. Then we go to David Montgomery at the Titans, Antonio Gibson at number 13 versus the Giants, Chris Carson at the Bills, Todd Gurley at 15 versus the Broncos, J.K. Dobbins at the Colts, Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus the Panthers, Jonathan Taylor versus the Ravens, Le'Veon Bell versus the Panthers, and at 20, shocker, Ezekiel Elliott versus the Steelers. You have any thoughts about that, Nick?
Yeah, one I find actually kind of interesting, and that's J.K. Dobbins. I think this is an interesting matchup because his workload has slowly but surely becoming higher and higher, and he's becoming their featured back.
Yeah, 67% on
So,
Sunday.
so that's an interesting one. It is
Snap
a,
percentage.
it's very high, but it's against the Colts defense, which I think is top 5. Yeah, it's number 4 against the run. So it's a tough matchup, but the way the Ravens are a run first offense, and today I believe they ran quite well against the number 1 ranked defense
Yeah,
for the
Pittsburgh.
run against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I do really think that's an interesting matchup, and I think over the coming weeks we could see J.K. Dobbins jump into the top 10 theoretically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen.
And against the Steelers, he had 7.5 yards per carry, which is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, especially against that defense.
Yeah, and I could see him, like, honestly, I could see him if Mark Ingram is out, because I could see Mark Ingram doing some touchdown vulturing potentially. But if he is out, I could see Dobbins kind of leaning more into that lead back role in an offense that might be kind of uncertain about Lamar Jackson's passing. Because Lamar Jackson has been having some accuracy issues. He's been facing a murderer's row of defenses lately. Like you go from the Steelers to the Colts, like that's pretty bad. I think that they'd want to maybe take some of the pressure off of him and focus on the run, and I think J.K. Dobbins is a great place for them to start.
Yeah. The other interesting matchup that I think that's here on our 11 through 20 is David Montgomery. He only does have, I think it's just shy of 4 yards per carry, which isn't fantastic, but his targets are pretty safe. I mean, you get about 5 targets per game on average.
Yeah.
And so I think he's got a pretty safe floor, and it's against a middle pack defense.
Yeah,
as
and
far as versus the run. So I think it's an interesting matchup, and he could surprise us this week and be closer to around number 10. But I think 20 is. I'm sorry, 12.
12, yeah.
12.
I think,
pretty good.
Yeah, that passing safety blanket. He's kind of
Right.
he's earned. I don't know how he's earned it. He's been not really efficient at all, but he's kind of in a way he's on Nick Foles' good side. So Nick Foles is doing those little dump off passes. Like his yards per catch pretty bad. You see against the Rams 4.2, Carolina 9.8, a little nice uptick, but everyone does well against Carolina. 4.3 yards per catch against Tampa Bay. He has these little moments where he does really well. It's not the sexiest play. And think of this as the Toyota Camry of running backs. Like, it's not flashy. No one's going to stop and stare at it and go, wow, you're doing this.
But it's reliable.
But you're getting to your destination, which
It's
is
reliable.
around 10 points.
Yeah.
Safe.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to explode. It won't look cool. It's not going to look good, but it's not going to lose you your matchup. Montgomery, I had high hopes for him this season, but just the fact that he's barely ever over 4 yards per carry, and he doesn't really do much with his receptions is concerning.
I think a large part of that is they're still trying to figure out what's going on over in Chicago as far as that offense. I mean, Nick Foles came in partway through the beginning of the season, so I think they're just still trying. It's clearly the weakness of their team. Their defense is pretty great, so
Yeah.
they're just trying to figure out the weapons that they have on offense because they do have a couple.
Yeah.
And I think down the stretch we could see David Montgomery boost higher in the rankings.
And a kind of similar position, actually, at number 11, David Montgomery being number 12, we have Myles Gaskin. And Myles Gaskin has quietly been putting together solid numbers against some good teams. 20 points in a PPR against the 49ers in Week 5, and another 12.3 against the Rams just this Sunday. He's becoming a safe option to start. His worst game in PPR was 9.2 points. So that's really not bad. The Rams, bear in mind, even though the score looked pretty bad on Sunday, that was mostly the defense and the Rams kind of throwing away. He was doing okay against a very tough defense. So he's one of those, like, 6 targets for 16 yards. It's not flashy. He's very similar to David Montgomery this week, and he's playing.
Again, you have a very safe floor with Myles Gaskin.
He's playing the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are, not one of. They're a little below average run defense, and they're below average against running backs in terms of fantasy points allowed. And I think that Gaskin will be able to capitalize on that. It's going to be interesting to see. And he's pass catching back with some games where he can really surprise you with his yards per carry, but he's a slightly better David Montgomery, 4.15 yards per carry on the season. So I guess the next one to note I'd want to talk about, Antonio Gibson versus the Giants. What do you think about that?
To be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Washington games, but when you look up his stats, he's carrying 4.4 yards per carry on average, which is very respectable. So, against a matchup like the Giants,
and he had about 9 points last time.
Yeah, and I mean, the Giants are ranked number 23 against the run. So when you got a guy who's carrying over 4 yards a carry against someone who's that low in run defense, I think he's going to have a very safe floor, probably minimum of 9 points. But we'll see,
I mean, he's pretty talented. He has some home run ability, I could see. It's especially considering he's starting to see an uptick in usage. Like when they were playing Dallas, he went absolutely crazy on them. He actually, I'm pulling up the stats right now. He did 20 carries, 1 target, and he did 128 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, and a touchdown. So that was on only 47% of the snaps. So that's one issue. The one issue I have with him is he's not seeing that high of a snap percentage, but 20 carries is nothing to scoff at, I think. And anytime you can see that kind of volume, that's a startable running back usually.
Yeah, and then again, the last time he played the Giants, which was in Week 6, so just a couple weeks ago, he did end up with 9.5 points. So there again, you have a very safe floor. He might not be a home run hitter and going to get you a ton of points, but he's going to bring you probably a minimum of about 9 points, which is quite solid for someone in that ranking.
And then at 14, we have Chris Carson. And if he's healthy, you're starting him. The Bills, middle of the road, running back defense, but Chris Carson's very talented. And he was jostling to get back on the field just this Sunday, and I could see him maybe making it back. This is one thing you'll have to pay attention to, is Chris Carson's injury status. But anyone who's owned Chris Carson before in fantasy football knows that that's what you have to do. He's always popping up there somewhere. Runs very hard, often gets hurt, but when he's playing, he's pretty premium.
Yeah. Now, it will be interesting to see their game plan next week, because as we've seen up until this week, Week 8, the Seahawks are going with a let Russ cook approach. So they're pass first. They pass on first and second down a lot. So I do have concerns about his running workload. But, I mean, Chris Carson has been used a fair amount in the passing game in the past. Mm-hmm. So if he's healthy, I do really like his upside.
Yeah, I wouldn't question starting him. Number 11 overall PPR running back before Sunday. Then we have Todd Gurley. Another Toyota Camry situation. He gets you there, not pretty. He finds a way to even when he's not trying to score, he's scoring. He falls in, rolls into the end zone, loses the game for the Falcons. Honestly, he's been averaging a mediocre 3.7 yards per carry, but his touchdown upside is huge.
Yes.
It bails him out.
Yes.
If he had no touchdowns, it would be a pretty hideous stat line, but he's getting all the opportunities there. There's not really anyone else trying to get in there. It's Todd Gurley's show. He's just really effective still. Even though his yards per carry are down, he's very effective at touchdowns.
Yeah, down on that goal line, they like to give it to him quite a bit. So.
Yeah. And that's why we have him at 15. If he doesn't get those touchdowns, Denver is a top 5 team when it comes against fantasy running backs. So that's something to consider. So expect a hideous stat line and sweat it out until he gets a touchdown. If he doesn't get the touchdown, it's going to be awful.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to be aware of with Todd Gurley. And now on to, we already talked a little bit about Dobbins. On to, let's bundle these two. We have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell versus the Panthers.
Now, Le'Veon Bell is just getting started in Kansas City, so you don't see a whole lot of carries yet. But I think as the weeks go on and as he gets more acclimated to the system, that workload will go up.
Yeah.
Today, he only averaged 1.2 yards per carry. I expect that to go up because Le'Veon Bell is a supreme talent.
And that was against the Jets.
So, the question just becomes, what's the workload split going to be like? Who's going to be the featured back if either of them are going to be the more predominantly featured?
I think in this situation, personally, I think this hurts Clyde Edwards-Helaire more than it hurts Bell. Bell was in, and he's been rescued. He was on a life raft, a lifeboat getting sent out of New York, and Andy Reid and the Chiefs scooped him up. So he's in a much better situation, I think, than Helaire is. He's losing a lot of, so he's getting into a split backfield situation, which that's kind of unfortunate for anyone who drafted him very high, but that's why he's down here more. It's not like the matchup. It's just a question of split. And I think they both, there's a chance both of them could get 10-plus points. But it's not going to be, their ceilings have been hit a bit by this. Bell had a bad ceiling before because of the Jets, but now Helaire is getting pulled down by the existence of Bell on that team.
Yeah.
And an interesting one, we have Jonathan Taylor at number 17. He was bad.
He was bad today.
Bad.
There was no question about it.
That was a yikes. A big oof. You just look and you just see, look at that stat line, and you see 5 fantasy points and 2 yards per carry.
Yeah.
That stinks. That's terrible.
It should be a lot better considering that they played the Lions today.
Yeah. And they were ahead the whole time.
So that concerns me. Yeah. They're going against the Ravens next week, who
they're
kept
really
it competitive with the Steelers today. So I don't particularly like Jonathan Taylor's upside for Week 9.
Yeah,
but then again, he's when he was at Wisconsin, he was supremely talented. So who knows? He could surprise us. He's had games where he's pulled off 15 points, 13 points. He had a 19-point game against Minnesota.
Yeah.
So he could have one of those vintage games. I shouldn't say vintage because he's in his first year.
I wouldn't get your hopes up.
But I wouldn't. Correct. I wouldn't get your hopes up.
He's so in the Detroit game, he got 33% of the snaps, 11 carries, a total of 13 touches, and he did pretty badly with it. And Baltimore is a significantly better run defense.
They are. Absolutely.
I definitely don't think this is gonna be his week to get right against Baltimore Ravens team that. Yeah. And remember, there's also going to be Phillip Rivers running a charity in the backfield, I think, towards. And he thought he'd escaped Marcus Peters by leaving the AFC West, but he's now following him around in the schedule. So, that guy is. I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus Peters had Phillip Rivers on his fave 5 because of how much Phillip's been in the giving spirit when they've encountered each other in the past. It's been gnarly. And honestly, that's another thing. So game script, and this is going to be a Baltimore Ravens team that lost last week. They lost this week against the Steelers. Close game, divisional matchup. They're going to be angry. And what do angry teams do?
They're gonna come out swinging for sure.
Yeah, that's why I would be really, really hesitant to start Taylor in this situation. It's pretty much the nightmare scenario. This is the doomsday scenario. You're hiding out if you have him in your lineup, just hoping that it doesn't come to that. That there's talent, but it's also the equivalent of driving your car into a brick wall.
It's just a matchup. It's a matchup issue. Yeah. I think he is very talented. That matchup is.
I hate that matchup.
Very bad one for him.
Yeah. Then the shocker, we have Zeke down here at number 20 against the Steelers. This is a home game for the Cowboys. I personally don't think it'll matter.
I don't think it does either. I was a little surprised just today to see how well the Ravens ran against the Steelers, who are the number 1 ranked defense. And I do know that Zeke is a top 3 back when he's right and when that line is right. But as we know, if you're following football at all,
it's not right.
The line's not right. Zeke's not right. Zeke's been giving up the ball lately. He's been coughing it up. So, I think it's going to be a tough day for Zeke.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. I don't know yet if Dalton's going to be back yet. I don't expect him to be back.
If I was Dalton, I wouldn't try to come back.
So I think they're going to go again with Ben DiNucci.
Yeah, let DiNucci take the Steelers for a little bit. Let him enjoy that.
I'm curious to see how Ben DiNucci does tonight against the Giants. He might be a pleasant surprise.
He's playing the Eagles tonight.
I'm sorry, you're right. The Eagles.
Yeah. I wouldn't expect much.
I'm not counting on it, but he could be a pleasant surprise. And if he's not, if he's bad, and he has to go again next week, I expect the Steelers to stack that box, and Zeke's just gonna have a miserable long day.
Yeah, I think that this is probably the worst matchup on the Cowboys' schedule, and I think personally, especially this is gonna be one of those games that's gonna be just painful to watch. And I could just picture it. It's gonna this is one of those setups where you could see the Steelers just putting in some backups after halftime.
It's a bad matchup because as we've seen over the last few years, when the Dallas offense is really good, it's good because it goes through Zeke, and Zeke's just not right now.
Yep.
So it's a tough matchup, probably the toughest one all year for them.
Yeah, and since Dak Prescott's been out, you've seen Zeke's touches decrease and his snap percentage go down, and that's always concerning. When you look at it, it's just Dak really helped open things up. It's another Glennon situation where you have a quarterback who can stretch the field, and then he goes out, and then you have someone who no one really respects in terms of passing coming in. And it just makes it a nightmare for running backs.
Yeah.
So I definitely, if you have someone else, the problem is a lot of people drafted Zeke number 3 overall in fantasy. Tough one, but I wouldn't let that blind you into forcing yourself into a really terrible situation.
Right. At the beginning of the year, that's not a bad move. I think Zeke is draftable at number 3.
No one knew this would happen.
But no, that's because no one knew that Dak would go out. No one knew that the line would fall apart. No one knew that Zeke, for some reason, just isn't himself. I think he does have a very good line, and that's helped him a lot more than we probably think. But I just, if you drafted him, that's a great move. I just think it's been tough.
And some tough sledding.
It's been tough, yeah. So.
Yeah, honestly.
So let's hope he gets, as a football fan, let's hope he gets right, because it's fun to see those supremely talented players.
Yeah.
When they go off. So I'm not a Cowboys fan, but again, I like to see the talented guys play well.
And I have Zeke on 2 of my fantasy teams, and that's been a rough adjustment. You're scared to start him.
Yeah.
No one drafted Zeke thinking that would happen, but that's unfortunately the reality we live in right now. Is the reality where Zeke scares you to start. Those turnovers, man, those are backbreaking. Okay, for our number 21 running back, we have Justin Jackson. Now, Justin Jackson is playing a terrible Raiders run defense, and I think he's got a fantastic opportunity. He's taking over the Chargers' backfield in the absence of Austin Eckler. So that's a very startable back, in my opinion. And then we will get on into our garbage bin. Plug your nose. We're diving in.
Hold tight.
Yeah. So 22, DeAndre Swift at the Vikings. Then we have 23, Zach Moss versus Seahawks. 24, Leonard Fournette versus Saints. 25, Devontae Freeman at the Footballs. Then we have 26, Melvin Gordon at the Falcons. 27, Ronald Jones versus Saints. 28, Philip Lindsay at the Falcons. And then you have 29, Gus Edwards at the Colts. And we'll round out the bin with Devin Singletary versus the Seahawks. So, what do you think of our garbage bin? It's looking pretty full.
It's about as full as it can get. Let me see here. There's a couple of interesting matchups that I think could potentially surprise us and the fantasy world. One of those is Gus Edwards. As I mentioned earlier with J.K. Dobbins, and I was talking a little bit about how I was so surprised that they were able to run so well against the Steelers. Mm-hmm. They might be able to do the same thing against the Colts, who, again, they're a top 5 rushing defense, but with the way that the Ravens were able to run against the Steelers today, we could see a repeat performance
from Gus Edwards.
From Gus Edwards, it'll be split carries between J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I'm not quite sure what the ratio is going to look like, but he could have actually a fairly good game and be in the top half of all running backs.
Yeah,
we'll see.
There's talent there, and he can climb his way out. He can see some daylight.
I think that's the one in our list that has the most potential to not be a dumpster dive.
I was kind of leaning towards DeAndre Swift against the Vikings as my candidate to escape the bin.
Well, you said he was just out of our bin, right?
No, that was Justin Jackson.
Oh, no, you're right.
Yeah, Justin Jackson snuck in at 21. Then you have 22, DeAndre Swift. Very likely opportunity to get out of there. It was a putrid matchup last week. They did all the running backs for the Lions did terrible against that Colts team. I think that he has a good bounce back week potentially against the Vikings, but it could go either way. The Vikings are looking better than they have in past weeks. They're kind of pulling it back.
The problem with the Vikings defense is it's just, you've got Mike Zimmer, and he's an incredible defensive. He's not a coordinator. He's their head coach.
He's defensive-minded coach.
But he's a defensive-minded head coach. I think the problem just is that they're so young on defense that they started off the year looking uncharacteristically bad. But the more they play, the more reps they get under their belt, the better they get. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they ended the year closer to top 10, maybe top 5. But we'll see.
Yeah, and they managed to really hold down a Packers offense in the second half on Sunday, which was pretty impressive. They've come a long way since when they started.
They gave Rodgers a fair bit of trouble. I was a little surprised at the game script for the Packers. Having Rodgers throw that many times, was over 40 times.
Yeah,
shocked me. But again, they didn't have Jones, so it's a good defensive team historically.
And I feel like they're kind of piecing it together as time goes on.
Right.
That's what these defensive coaches do. They might start off bad some years, but they generally start piecing it together as time goes on. And it's always dangerous to bet all your bet everything on the Lions. That's always a little sketchy. Like those are those moments where you kind of start sweating.
Yeah.
Then we have Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones. Those are interesting. I put Leonard Fournette a little higher because he seems to be getting more of those passing downs. Like he seems to be more involved, I think, in the passing game.
Yeah. And in a PPR league, that's what you want. So.
Yeah. And that Saints team is a little tough on the run. So that's something to look out for. They're one of the top 5 and top 10 run defenses for fantasy.
Yeah, they're at number 8.
So that's going to be a little tough, I think, for these running backs on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's why these guys are down here. And they're not, I wouldn't say they're not startable. It's just don't be surprised if you get some low score on them.
Right, yeah.
Then I think the sketchiest start for me, honestly, the Broncos running backs kind of scare me a little bit. And just that offense hasn't looked right. You have a lot of turnovers. You have a lot of miscues. And they're going up against a Falcons run defense that's actually, shockingly enough, pretty average, pretty decent.
They're top half. I mean, they do their run defense better than their pass defense. And again, there you've got a split backfield, so it'll be very interesting to see what their split carries are like. But yeah, I agree with you as far as the offensive concerns for Denver. It'll be
and these bottom ranked players, they're not, as I said before, they're not startable, but they're players you shouldn't be surprised if things go full-blown meltdown on their side. You can't expect perfection. Like, they have the opportunity for everything to fall apart. So that's something to look at.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please let us know what you think down in the comments, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next week.